Welcome, guys.
Hello. Yeah.
How are you doing?
Yes, good. Hi, I'm Jacob, and on the AG charts, and
Yeah, I'm Stephen, and it's nice to join in the conference.
Yes, nice to have you here. So, again, as a reminder, the audience can ask any questions in the chat. We have a few questions planned ahead of time to get it smooth. So let's start without further ado. First one would be, how do you ensure performance across multiple different frameworks?
So I guess this is first, it's something you measure and I guess work out, and I guess this is also where you say, what is performance? Like, you've got plain JavaScript performance, you've got performance which is then, I guess, specific to a framework situation. But yeah, so like if we can take an example which I've recently worked on, so recently I've done some Angular performance around custom cell components. So then, there it really was a matter of measuring with the tools that Angular gives us, and also Chrome DevTools, what kind of performance wins can we do there when we're looking at a specific feature, whereas other parts of the grid, and maybe for charts like the algorithm that you presented earlier, it's that performance is the same code across the different frameworks. So when you improve the performance of that vanilla JavaScript, you can reuse that in the same places.
I mean, I think it's also important to know which kind of metric, because performance is a broad topic, and depending on if it's INP, CLS, or whatever, can also like have quite a big difference. So yeah, that's very fair.
It is very key and very important to isolate exactly what you are trying to improve, or like what is the user experiencing, what's the slowdown that they're feeling, and then making sure you have a metric to then improve exactly that.
Yes. How do you maintain documentation and examples across frameworks?
So yeah, I guess that's on our AG Grid and AG Charts website. So because we want people to use the framework of their choice, and we provide that all those different offerings from React, Angular, Vue, as well as just vanilla JavaScript, because there's thousands of examples on the doc site, manually writing all of them would be just too time consuming, and it would be a good use of, I guess, the developer's effort to maintain all of them. So we have implemented a system where we can write it in plain TypeScript, and we parse that, extract the abstract syntax tree from it. And so then we can identify, okay, well, this is a bit of the configuration, this is a helper function, and build up our own model of that, and then pass that through framework-specific mappers, which then generate the framework code. And so at the end of that, we write the TypeScript example with the types, and that all flows through to the different frameworks. Now, there are some edge cases where you're writing code which is too complex for that AST, and then you can have a fallback where you can just manually write the frameworks. But that has saved us so much time, and also then improves the developer experience for the docs, because you see, if you're a React developer, you see React code.
Yeah, it's good for us as well, because we can also do automated testing on all of these examples. So normally you're just kind of testing one thing, but because we're kind of automatically generating these examples in all the frameworks we support, one of our CI jobs is just to run all of them in the browser, kind of see what happens, see if there's any kind of console warnings. So it's good for us to test as well.
Yeah, it's also very nice because I didn't thought about that. Most of the time, like if you have like examples or something, it's either, as you said, by developers, or otherwise by community contributions or something. So like keeping a big documentation database up to date on everything, especially like breaking changes, that might be quite tricky. But that's a very good take. If you achieve to have some kind of mapper like that, that's quite clever. Well played. I mean, that's also very nice, because especially if nowadays we have AI scraping the things to try to pull a few questions. Yeah, that also makes sense. How do you architecture APIs in a way that is idiomatic for all frameworks?
Probably one for Grid more, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think that's where it's really important to think of the configuration as what is the user doing with this API, and try and abstract yourself from the specific implementations. So like, for example, if I'm working on a feature for React, and you want to delay the rendering of, maybe we've got one cell, which is a really heavy component. And so we want to scroll the grid, and we don't want the scrolling to be slowed down by that heavy cell. So we need to have some way for the user to configure, that cell this is a slow one. So maybe let's show a loading overlay while we're scrolling. And then when the user has reached where they want to see, then we'll spend the time rendering those expensive components. So like under the hood, this might be using React's use transition or start transition. So like in this example, you could think, well, in the cell renderer params, I'm going to have a flag which is use transition. But you've tied yourself very specifically to the framework, underlying code. And say we want to do the same feature across the different frameworks. Well, maybe use transition doesn't make sense for Angular. So then you have to kind of think, well, what are we doing? And maybe a more sensible flag is like defer render or something else. But I think that's a key part in terms of naming things. It's always about naming is the first thing where we can make this API idiomatic. But then I guess also from the way that things work, different frameworks do have different patterns.
Definitely.
So
have you maybe faced more specific issues with some frameworks and less with others?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Like a good example is React. It does behave more asynchronously when it's rendering than maybe Angular, or especially just when you're writing vanilla JavaScript and TypeScript. So you have to kind of work around that. But then that's kind of our job as a library, is to hide that from our users. So like if you're using AGGrid in TypeScript or Angular or React, we want you just to get a really high performance grid, high performance charts without realizing, the framework that you're working in.
But the intrinsic parts, implementation details and everything, yeah.
So there's, so that's one way, we work out how do we interact with the framework with its specific hooks and features to give the same end user experience. It's not always easy. I would say that's what we're trying to do for our users.
And how many frameworks do you support currently?
Officially, we support Angular, React, and Vue, as well as vanilla JavaScript. But there are community wrappers for Solid, Svelte. There's one for Python, like -AGGrid. So there's different ones but the ones that we officially support are the ones that then have official wrappers and documentation examples. But yeah, the community does a good job of wrapping the vanilla JavaScript grid with a framework wrapper of choice.
Perfect. Yeah, and then at the end of the day, if you have a wrapper, then you only need to take care of the underneath implementation. So that's definitely fine. Okay. How does building a library compare to building an app? Like, what are the differences?
Biggest difference is, you've got end users, right? And your end users are developers. So you've got to think a lot about, you've got to get your API kind of set up first. You need to kind of think about all the cases that you're going to handle ahead of time, because you can't make big changes. If you make big changes, there's a big impact on users down the line, and they're unlikely to upgrade and all of these things. So the biggest thing is just how much consideration you have to put into the features before you can even start writing them. Yeah, probably the biggest one.
And also, I guess in an application, it's a very, testing becomes a bit narrower. Like you can clearly define, okay, this is the way that this application can be used. Whereas with a library, the API surface, especially for grid and charts, is vast.
Yeah.
And like the combination of the way you can combine properties, like we were changing a feature and we were thinking, okay, how do we exhaustively test the combination of these 8 properties? And like, the combinatorics of that just explodes. So there's different challenges when it comes to, I guess, testing a library and testing an application from that point of view as well.
It's very hard to predict what users are going to do as well, because you have your idea of how they should use their library, but when the tickets come in with bug reports, they use it in a very different way as well. So
yeah, it's like, people will figure out how it works, and it turns out they don't. So yeah. What's the most exciting? What do you prefer, library or app?
Worked on both. I mean, I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah, so I guess I think for me, there's the nice thing about an application is you build it, ship it, and you can see people immediately benefiting from the application. Like, so before I joined AGGrid, I worked, for someone who then was using AGGrid. So I gave them this application to be able to, see all the trading data in AGGrid, in this sense, enable them to handle this big data set and get all the insights that they wanted. And so you get that really quick feedback cycle, especially if it's internal kind of applications where they're being deployed every day. You can make a change and instantly people are seeing the benefit. Whereas then with the library, you sometimes don't get that. Like, we'll ship a new major and people won't be upgrading to that for maybe like a year's time, or just because of the way that some of the big customers they work. So that feedback cycle is quite different. But then on the flip side, you're not actively maybe running a live application, so you do have a slightly slower pace in terms of you can really start to think about and take time to make sure you get your API right.
Speaking of breaking changes, how do you anticipate or adapt to new frameworks or major changes that can arise any day?
Yeah, so obviously the new not the new frameworks, when the frameworks are releasing new versions, they're all doing a good job now of giving you these release candidates. So that is a really nice way that you can then start testing ahead of time against those candidates. So if you do spot issues, you've got a bit of time there to try and sort them out before the next major lands, and then everyone wants to use your library with all the new features of the major. So that's one way, but then I guess it's also just keeping your finger on the pulse of what is happening in the ecosystem, what's happening, in which direction are the frameworks going. But then some things do just catch you out. I mean,
happens.
We do have testing as well. So it kind of simulates, it will literally kind of do the install steps for a framework like React or Angular, install our library, kind of quickly plug it in. And so we do have these kind of tests as well to make sure that we're kind of staying ahead of the curve a little bit as well.
And then if we need to, we can then have Version feature toggles. So that's something which is, you hope, is more of a last resort. But say like a new feature comes in and you need the grid to work with both versions at the same time, then we can do version detection and change under the hood so that a user doesn't see the difference and they can just upgrade, and we decide based on the version they're using what we do.
Clever. Maybe one personal question, because I heard that some people sometimes get, just as you said, some insights ahead of time because of changes. So do you have framework founders or maintainers reaching out to you and saying, hey guys, in the next 6 months, we're going to have this big change, so maybe expect this to happen, and I'm going to tell you it ahead of time so that way you know and you adapt? I mean, this is probably what you meant a few minutes ago.
I guess I more meant in terms of from the Angular side of things, they've got their RFCs, And so
Yeah,
you can,
yeah.
I guess, that's a really
I mean,
nice.
yeah, sometimes it's like public RC, sometimes it's private because you want to like surprise the people with something crazy. But then if it's crazy for the users and the library maintainers, then it's like not the best kind of crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I wouldn't say we have a direct hotline to the team members, but then also I guess we have also been to the conferences where these team members are, and so you do get that chance to interact with them, and that's a really kind of valuable opportunity to see. And I guess you've had people from the core teams I see at the conference yesterday and today, and so if people can ask questions that way as well, that's really helpful.
There. So then is this how you choose which framework to support officially? By like speaking with people and saying, oh, this has a lot of adoption or hype or people are interested, let's support with something official there?
So I think this is where there's the separation between what's exciting and what's financially viable as a business. And so, there's things where, for taking Solid, for example, that has had a lot of hype. And so we did a spike. We did actually support it officially for a bit. But then from the paying customers, there wasn't the same level of demand. So, in that example, it was more like, I guess, a business decision. The cost of maintaining the Solid implementation kind of didn't match up with the paying customers. So you have to kind of make those decisions when it comes to from a business point of view. But fortunately, the Solid community, someone volunteered, they took it over, and so there is a community wrapper. But that is something in which I guess we monitor. But we do have those constraints of, well, where's the paying customer support coming from? And so if we have lots of enterprise users saying we want to use it in this framework, then that suddenly is much of a kind of helps make the decision.
I think as well, you kind of know from job postings and stuff what are the popular frameworks, and I think we're all developers and we all kind of know which ones generally have business backing. So I think that kind of leads into it a lot as well.
Yeah, it's also the difference between people saying things on Twitter and actual paying customers. There's sometimes a big difference between those. So yeah. Next question from the audience. I'm not sure I fully understand what it means. What's the USP of AG charts over something like Chart.js? USP stands for user.
I mean, it kind of really depends what your business needs are. So, whenever you buy an AG charts license, you are getting official support with that. So if you have any questions or any bugs, they're going to, it's going to go through to our support team. It will get fixed. And, for a lot of businesses, that is incredibly valuable. And it sort of depends what you want. I mean, as well, AG charts is also open source. If you're using the community version, that is MIT licensed, you can use it for free. You don't need to pay us anything. So it's really kind of the upsell of something like AG Charts Enterprise. You get a few more features there. You get the support. So you use whatever you prefer. But, use AG Charts.
I think it's also important, for example, if you have clients that you tell to them, hey, we're actually paying for it, so we have guaranteed support and people that can help us, rather than it being an open source project and like the person just gives up and then you have no support and the thing dies.
There is, it kind of in some senses feels a bit crass to talk about money, but we are going to be here for a long time. We have made a business out of doing this. Whereas some of the kind of React charting libraries or whatever charting libraries you prefer, there's no guarantees that they're going to kind of stay around. I mean, a lot of people switched over to style components, for example, and I think earlier this year, I mean, it's been officially announced that that's no longer maintained. So everyone using that now has to kind of migrate over. So you do get those guarantees that we're here for the long term.
Always reliable and safe choice then. Okay, good. Can you maybe share a secret as of how you made it so fast to keep up with the 60 frames?
So this is, I guess there's different parts to it. There's, I guess, measuring it, making sure that we keep an eye on this, make sure that we're profiling it, recording these metrics as we go. Other parts is just taking the time, opening up the profile and recording it and seeing what is happening in the tools. So it is an ongoing thing because the browser changes, underneath you as well. So it's not just a matter of, okay, well, what framework they're using, what framework version are they using, what browser are they using, what version. At least now, if people are using Chrome, most of them are pretty much on the same versions, but things can change in browser implementations, which do then impact things. But yeah, so I would say, how does it stay fast? It's that constant coming back to it. Like, we're never kind of satisfied with the performance. So it's always that kind of thinking, well, what can we target next? In terms of when you're looking at the profile of when you're scrolling, is there anything else that we can investigate, spend some time looking into? Can we improve things with styling? Is there some JavaScript which we can improve? So I wouldn't say there's a magical secret, but it is just that committed effort over time. Again, I guess it's a similar thing to the support thing. This is kind of what you're buying into. It's that we are here and we're going to keep working on it. So if things do change, then we can react to that.
Yeah, it's consistently sweating and putting in the hard effort day. So that's the secret sauce. So no big secret, let's say. Maybe a last question. What's the most unexpected or creative way that you've seen someone use AG-Grid?
That is a good question.
That's a trick question. It's the last one, so you can take your time to think about it. Or maybe one solution that was quite impressive, or I don't know, any kind of metric that would be like, wow, that's nice.
So this thing is, it would be really nice for people to send this to us, like if they are using AG-Grid or AG-Grid in a way, because I think this is one of the things people use. They take the library, use it, but they don't always tell us or show us back what they've done with it. But yeah, so I mean, we've definitely seen lots of financial applications. We've seen a football betting or a predictor as well. That was used. But yeah, I don't have anything too crazy. If someone has,
that's the thing. You don't have telemetry or anything. So I guess I guess you can have a GSAP showcase videos or something where you make a crazy presentation. But again, you need people to submit the things. Yeah, I get it. It's a little bit tricky. Okay. Thanks again, guys. That was very nice and good to know like how the team works. I personally used AG-Grid a few times in companies, but knowing that you are behind it and like you're there for the support, it's always reassuring for end users. So thanks a lot for you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you everyone for joining.
Yep.